He hadn't smiled in 4 years. Not since the car accident that took his wife and son. He was in that alley to kill someone when Nadia dropped to her knees begging for her daughter's life. But her 5-year-old daughter stepped forward, held out a crushed orange candy, her last one, and said, "Take it. I want you to smile." He took it, put it in his jacket pocket, and let them both live. Days later, his rivals saw the hesitation and began stalking their apartment, so he had them extracted to his fortress estate, forced them to live under his roof, and spent the next week sleeping under the same ceiling as the woman he couldn't stop thinking about. By the end of it, Seoul's most feared mafia boss had cancelled a syndicate meeting to make rice congee for her sick daughter, kept a crumpled candy in his chest pocket every single day, and smiled for the first time. But the question isn't whether he falls for them. It's whether a man who built his entire identity on being unreachable will let himself have them before it's too late. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do it right now. Hit that button, drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one. This channel is where love finds the people who stopped believing in it. And I don't want you to miss a single story. Now, let's go back to that alley. The candy was orange, crushed on one side, still wrapped in cellophane, slightly sticky from being held too long in a small, nervous fist. Seoul was cold that Tuesday night, the kind of cold that came off the Han River and pressed itself against every surface, and Nadia Beaumont Hale had taken a wrong turn. One wrong turn. That was the whole catastrophe. A split grocery bag, a hungry 5-year-old pulling at her hand, a shortcut through Mapo she'd walked a dozen times in daylight that became something else entirely at 9:30 at night. She heard the voices before she saw the alley. Low, controlled, Korean moving too fast for her to follow. She should have turned around. She kept walking. And then she was inside it, and the men at both ends of the alley had their hands inside their jackets, and the man pressed against the wall had stopped breathing, and the man standing in front of him, the one giving the orders, the one that other men were watching for permission, turned around and looked at her. Baek Ji-seon. She didn't know the name yet. She knew the face. Sharp jaw, scarred cheekbone, eyes so dark they pulled light in and gave nothing back. The kind of face that had been made cold by something specific. Something that had happened once and settled permanently. He was the most dangerous person she had ever been in a room with. She knew it the way you knew temperature. Immediately, in your body, before your brain had time to form an opinion. She dropped to her knees. She wrapped her arms around Seraphine and squeezed her eyes shut and waited. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that her daughter had other plans. Seraphine stepped forward. 5 years old. Yellow coat. Stuffed rabbit under one arm and a crumpled orange candy in her outstretched hand, the last one from a bag that was now scattered across the wet pavement with the split groceries. She looked up at the most feared man in Seoul and said, in a clear, matter-of-fact voice that expected to be listened to, "Take it. I want you to smile." The alley went absolutely silent. The guards at both ends stopped moving. The man against the wall stopped thinking about dying. Nadia, on her knees with her eyes squeezed shut, realized she could no longer hear anything happening and opened them. Baek Ji-seon had crouched down to her daughter's eye level. He was looking at the candy in Seraphine's hand. The candy was a little torn at one corner, slightly compressed from being carried in a coat pocket all day. It was the last piece. She could somehow tell that. He understood it was the last piece. He looked at it for a moment that lasted longer than it should have. Then he looked at Seraphine's face. Then slowly he reached out and took it. He stood up. He put the candy in the inside pocket of his jacket, close to his chest, not in his outer pocket, close to his chest. And he looked at Nadia still kneeling on the pavement. His expression didn't change. His voice didn't change. He said one word to the man against the wall. "Leave Seoul. Tonight." And then he walked past both of them without looking back. His guards fell in behind him. The alley was empty in 30 seconds. For the first time in 4 years, the space behind his sternum felt like something other than stone. He didn't examine why. Nadia got off the pavement. She picked up what she could of the groceries. She took Seraphine's hand and walked home and did not let herself feel anything until they were inside with the door locked. Then she sat down on the kitchen floor and breathed for 3 minutes. She thought she was done with Bec Giseon. She was so wrong it almost destroyed her. The problem started 2 days later, and it started with breakfast. Seraphine woke up Wednesday morning asking for him. Not by name. She didn't have one. She called him the sad man, which was more accurate than anything Nadia could have come up with. She asked at breakfast. She asked while getting dressed. She asked on the walk to daycare and again at pickup. At dinner, she pushed her food around the bowl and said, in the particular tone she used for her most devastating observations, "I don't think he ate the candy yet. He didn't look like he was going to eat it right away." By Thursday, she was waking in the night, crying. Not the fear crying that would have made sense, not a trauma response Nadia knew how to treat. Something else. Yearning. She wanted to find the sad man and confirm that the candy had worked. By Friday, she refused breakfast entirely. Arms folded, chin down, not eating anything until she could make sure he was okay. Nadia sat across from her daughter and thought, in the flat, exhausted way of a woman who has hit the wall, this is not manageable. She spent all day Friday running probability calculations on how a person located a Korean crime boss in a city of 10 million people and politely asked him to please smile at her daughter so the child would eat again. She had no answer by the time she walked home, but she had something else instead. She noticed the car. It had been parked across the street when she left that morning. It was still there. Different men inside, same angle, watching the entrance to her building with a patience that was not the patience of people waiting for someone they knew. Her stomach dropped all the way to the pavement. She walked past her building without changing pace, called her colleague Wurim, and said, "I need advice, quickly." She didn't get to use it, because she didn't find Bec Giseon. Bec Giseon found her first. She was in Wurim's car with Seraphine asleep in the back when another car pulled alongside them at a red light and the window came down. A man with a precise, neutral face said, in flawless English, "Mr. Beck would like to speak with you. You and the child will be safe. You have my word." Nadia stared at him. "I don't know who Mr. Beck is." The man looked at her with the patience of someone delivering a familiar message. "Yes, you do." Wurim's face said, "I have no advice for this. None." Nadia thought about the car outside her building. She thought about the daycare route. She thought about the fact that whatever calculation had kept them alive in the alley was apparently still running. "Fine," she said. She thought she was walking into a conversation. She was walking into a week that would crack her open. The estate was in the hills north of the city, behind walls and gates and 3 security checkpoints, and it was the most aggressively unwelcoming place she'd ever been. Not because it was ugly, it wasn't. It was the kind of architecture that said money so quietly it became a different language, but because it had no life in it, no photographs, no disorder, no evidence that the person who lived here had ever set anything down and left it. The silence was maintained, not peaceful. Seraphine pressed her face to the car window and said, "This is a very big house." Then, "It needs more flowers." Giseon was at the window when they brought her in, back to the room, hands clasped. He didn't turn around immediately. She was too exhausted and too furious to be impressed by it. "You had people watching my apartment," she said to his back. He turned. His face was the same as in the alley. "My rivals had people watching your apartment. They were there before mine were." "Why?" "They saw what happened in the alley." A pause. "You are, apparently, a liability." Seraphine, who had been conducting a methodical inspection of the room, looked up and said, "You still have the candy." Something changed in Jiseon's face. Fractional, controlled, but real. He looked at her daughter and said quietly, "I do." Seraphine asked if he'd eaten it. He said not yet. She told him candy was better when it wasn't old, but that it was okay to save things. She saved things sometimes too. Jiseon looked at this 5-year-old who had negotiated her way into his strongest fortress and said nothing for a moment. Then he told Nadia she would stay until the threat was resolved, that she would have everything she needed. "I have a job," Nadia said. "A research fellowship. A life that exists in apartments and school pickups, not guarded compounds. You have a car with 3 men outside your building who have instructions that are not friendly. I'm not asking your permission." He looked at her with something that was almost surprise. Most people didn't speak to him like that. She was too tired to be most people right now. "You can leave," he said, finally. "I cannot guarantee your safety if you do." She looked at him across the immaculate room with Seoul glittering indifferently below. "1 week," she said. "You have 1 week to make this go away. Then we're leaving." He said, "1 week?" She thought she had the upper hand. She had no idea what she had walked into. Here's what she didn't know yet about being trapped in a house with Baek Jiseon. The real danger was never the guards. The real danger was the kitchen at 2 in the morning. But first, Seraphine had to dismantle his entire security apparatus from the inside. By the end of day 1, she had learned 4 guards' names. By the second morning, she had established that Chaewon, a man who looked like he had been assembled from reinforced concrete, who had worked for Jiseon for 6 years without once being caught off guard, would push her on the garden swing if she asked with sufficient persistence. Nadia watched this negotiation happen from the kitchen window. Seraphine had approached Chaewon with the focused intentionality of a diplomat presenting credentials, pointed at the swing, pointed at herself, deployed 3 words of Korean, and waited. Chaewon had looked at the swing, looked at Nadia through the window. Nadia shrugged. 20 minutes later, Chaewon was pushing a 5-year-old on a garden swing with the expression of a man who had not entirely hated the experience and was deciding what to do with that information. By day 3, Seraphine was sharing her breakfast crackers with 2 guards and teaching a younger one named Jiho how to play the hand-clapping game she'd learned at daycare. Nadia watched the estate become, incrementally and against her will, something that felt like it might eventually be habitable. She did not examine this too closely. The kitchen happened on the 3rd night. She'd been awake since 2, the bone-level tired that came from sustained vigilance and too many nights of broken sleep, and she'd gone to the kitchen because it was the only room in the building that felt like someone actually lived there. She'd been sitting at the island for 20 minutes when she heard footsteps. She looked up. Jiseon stopped in the doorway when he saw her. She watched him make the decision not to retreat. He crossed to the refrigerator, poured water, stood on the other side of the island, and didn't speak first. She looked at his hands around the glass. Still hands, the same stillness everything about him had. But at 2 in the morning, without the jacket, with the day stripped back, the stillness looked different. Not control. The thing control was built to protect. Something that had been very badly hurt and had learned to hold itself completely still so it wouldn't fracture further. She said, "How long have you been running this?" 12 years. "And before 12 years?" "Before 12 years, I was someone's son." He drank his water. "That person no longer exists." She heard what he left out. She always heard what people left out. It was how she did her research. Reading the silences between sentences for where the real information lived. The gap around that sentence was enormous. "What happened?" she asked. He set down the glass. He looked at the window, which showed nothing at this hour but their reflection in the dark glass. "A car accident. 4 years ago. My wife. My son. They were coming to meet me after a meeting that ran late." He stopped. "I was the reason they were in the car at that hour." She said nothing. There was nothing adequate to say, and she knew it. She let the silence hold what it needed to hold. I built most of this afterward, he said. The business existed before. I had other reasons then. Ambition, the particular drive of someone trying to build something that would outlast him. Now I run it because it's the only thing I'm still good at, and because stopping would require me to be someone I don't know how to be anymore. That's why you don't smile, she said. He looked at her. Most people don't notice. I noticed before Seraphine did. In the alley. You look like someone who had forgotten that smiling was an option. She wrapped both hands around her cup. She saw your face and thought, this person needs help. That was her entire calculation. No history, no caution, no threat assessment. Just, he needs help. I have something, I'll give it. Something moved through his expression. Not quite pain, not quite its opposite. Something that looked like being seen in a way that hurt and helped at the same time. She gave me her last candy, he said quietly. I know. She'd been saving it since morning. A long silence. Then, almost to himself. Why? Because she's 5, Nadia said, and 5-year-olds haven't learned yet that you're supposed to protect yourself from other people's sadness. She looked at him steadily. Some people never learn it. I'm starting to think that might be the better way to be. He held her gaze for a moment longer than was comfortable. Then he looked at his glass. When he looked back, something had shifted. Not open, not yet, but the thing just before open. The edge of it. You're not afraid of me, he said. I was in the alley, I'm not now. What changed? She thought about Chaewon and the garden swing, about this man's stillness at 2 a.m. and how it looked like grief rather than danger. About a crumpled candy in an inside jacket pocket, kept close to the chest. You kept it, she said simply. He didn't ask what she meant. He knew. She stood up, rinsed her cup, said goodnight. She felt his eyes on her back the whole way to the door. She went to bed, and, for the first time in 6 nights, she slept. She woke up the next morning already in trouble and not ready to admit it. 3 days into the week, and something was already shifting that she couldn't reverse. She told herself it was just proximity, just the particular intensity of a crisis creating false intimacy. She had studied enough sociology to know exactly how that worked, and she was not going to be undone by it. She was a researcher from Baton Rouge with a fellowship and a 5-year-old and a life to get back to, and she was not going to develop feelings for a Korean crime lord because he stood in a kitchen and looked at her like she was the first thing in 4 years worth looking at directly. She told herself that. It did nothing. And then, on day 4, Seraphine got sick. Not seriously. A fever that climbed to 38.5, a stuffy nose, the general misery of a small person running on disrupted sleep, and the tail end of a daycare cold. But she was flushed and cranky and wanted her mother and refused all food. Nadia was managing all of it from the guest suite bed when the door opened at noon and Jaseon was standing in the frame. Not his assistant. Not Chaewon. Him. She found out later, from Chaewon, who had been told not to mention it, that Jaseon had a meeting with 3 syndicate captains he'd been scheduling for 2 weeks. He canceled it. Without explanation, without rescheduling, just canceled it, went to the kitchen, and came back 20 minutes later with a bowl of rice congee so perfect it could only have been made by someone who'd been taught by someone who made it every time a person in their family was sick. He stood in the doorway holding it. Seraphine looked up from the bed with her red-rimmed eyes and said, You made food? It's good for a fever, he said. She considered him for a moment. Did you eat the candy yet? He set the bowl down. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. The same place, always the same place, and produced the candy. Still wrapped, a little more creased. 5 days in his chest pocket. He held it up. I've been saving it, he said. The same way you were saving it. Seraphine's flushed face broke into a smile. She held out her hand. He gave it to her. She unwrapped it with careful, deliberate fingers, broke it in half with the precision of someone who had decided this mattered, and held one half back out to him. "We can share," she said. "Then you'll smile and I'll smile and we can both have it." Nadia was standing in the bathroom doorway watching all of this, and she had no vocabulary for what she felt. It wasn't grief, and it wasn't joy. It lived in the exact place where those two things touched. Jiseon looked at the half candy in the small outstretched hand. He took it. He ate it. And then, quietly, with the startled quality of something finding a way out of a place it had been locked in for a very long time, he smiled. A real one. Not performed, not controlled. Just real. Seraphine smiled back, satisfied. She'd known it would work. It just took a little time. Nadia turned to the sink and ran cold water and breathed. She was in trouble. She understood that now with perfect, unwelcome clarity. Specific, complete, deeply inadvisable trouble. Nothing to do with rivals, or alleyways, or cars outside her building. Everything to do with a man who kept a crumpled candy in his chest pocket for 5 days and canceled a syndicate meeting to make rice congee and smiled like he'd forgotten he still could. She told herself to get it together. She did not get it together. Then the breach happened, and everything she thought she understood about the week shattered. Day 6, 11 p.m. She heard it before she understood it. A change in the quality of the silence, a sound with no domestic explanation, then Chaewon's voice outside her door, low and urgent. She was already moving before he finished saying her name. Seraphine out of bed and in her arms by the time the alarm tone shifted from soft to hard. Chaewon's face when he opened the door told her everything she needed to know. She went. Interior room, reinforced walls, a single monitor showing security feeds in cold blue light. She sat with Seraphine in her lap and watched the screens. The north wing. Lights were down. The inside man had cut power to 3 grid sectors before anyone caught him. The east gate was open. Men moving through it with the practiced efficiency of people who'd done this before. She found Jiseon on the monitor. She felt her breathing stop. He moved differently on those screens than he moved in the house. Every version of him she'd seen in the estate was controlled and deliberate. A man who had decided exactly how much space to occupy. What she saw on the monitors was something older and less considered. A lethality that wasn't being managed because it didn't need to be. She watched him move through the chaos of his own estate like a man built for exactly this who hated that he was built for it. She had been watching for 11 minutes when the door to the interior room opened. It was not Chaewon. She had time to register the face. Unfamiliar, hard-jawed, contained triumph. And then she was on her feet with Seraphine behind her, and her hands were already moving. The only solid object in reach was the base of the monitor stand. Heavy steel. She made the calculation in under a second. Move first. Move now. She moved. The stand caught him across the shoulder and spun him sideways into the wall. She was pulling Seraphine toward the far corner when the door came off its frame. Jiseon was there. He took in the scene in one sweep. Intruder regaining his footing. Nadia with her daughter behind her. Monitor stand on the floor. And something crossed his face that she had never seen on it before. Not coldness, not calculation. Something raw and furious that had a direction. He was very efficient. She didn't watch the details. She turned toward the wall and held Seraphine close and talked to her in a steady, low voice about where they'd go on vacation when this was done. And Seraphine had opinions even now, flushed and frightened as she was. When the room went quiet, she turned around. He was looking at her. Jacket gone. A cut-along. Hit him, he said. You took 11, hit him, he said. You took 11 minutes, she said. A pause. Are you hurt? No. She looked at Seraphine. She's okay. He crossed the room and crouched in front of Seraphine the way he had in the alley and checked her face and hands with a thoroughness that was not for show. Seraphine, pale and wide-eyed, said, You came back. I told you I would, he said, which wasn't technically true, but she accepted it as fact. He stood. He looked at Nadia. It's over, he said. The leadership cell. We have them. It won't be a problem again. She felt relief. She also felt, underneath it, the specific dread of a woman who realizes that the problem being resolved means she has to leave. She thought she wasn't ready for that. She was right. But she was wrong about why. He came to her room the next morning, 9 o'clock, full daylight. The estate quiet around him, last night's evidence reduced to a locked wing and fresh guard rotations. He knocked. She opened the door. He'd changed clothes. His arm was bandaged. His face was composed. The full armor of it. The version she'd learned to recognize as the one he wore when he was about to do something he'd decided was right, even though it wasn't what he wanted. She recognized it because she wore it too sometimes. The threat has been neutralized, he said. You're free to go. I'll arrange a car. Okay. Security will be on your building. Quietly. Okay. He stopped. He was waiting for something, or fighting with whether to say it. The particular stillness of a man holding himself in place against what he actually felt. She waited. She was good at waiting. I'll get Seraphine's things, she said, and started to turn. He said her name. Not Ms. Beaumont Hale. Her name. Nadia. The first time. She turned back. He was looking at her with the uncontrolled version. All of it present. Nothing rationed. The weight of a person who had been carefully measuring themselves for 4 years suddenly not measuring. I spent 11 minutes getting to you, he said. His voice was even. He was working to keep it even. 11 minutes. I've run this operation for 12 years and I've never lost 11 minutes. I couldn't move the way I needed to because I was thinking about the two of you and not the task. That has never happened. He held her gaze. I need you to know that. Her heart was doing something she was going to have to address eventually. What do you want me to do with that information? I don't know, he said. I've never had to give it to anyone before. From the garden below, faint and ordinary and irreplaceable, Seraphine's voice giving Chaewon very specific instructions about swing technique. The sound of her daughter being fine. You're sending us away, Nadia said. I'm giving you your life back. You're sending us away because last night scared you. He didn't answer. Honesty by omission, she'd learned to read it in a week. She could probably spend a very long time learning to read it. Jiseon, she said. Something moved in his face. The name, without the distance. You kept a crumpled candy in your jacket pocket for 5 days, she said. You canceled your syndicate meeting to make rice congee. You smiled at my daughter like it was something you didn't know you still had. She stepped into the hall and looked at him directly, the way she looked at everything she'd decided to examine. You don't get to look at me across a kitchen island at 2 in the morning the way you looked at me, and then hand me a bag and close the door. I'm dangerous, he said, not metaphorically. I know. I watched you on the monitors. She didn't look away. I also watched you crouch in front of my daughter and check her hands. Both things are true at the same time. I can hold both of them. Most people can't. I'm not most people. She held his gaze. And I don't think you are either, regardless of what you've been telling yourself for 4 years. She's going to ask for you, Nadia said. Every day. The same way she asked for the sad man in the alley for 5 days straight and refused breakfast. I am not watching my daughter mourn someone she doesn't know how to be without. Her voice was level, completely level. So decide, right now, whether you're going to do the noble thing that protects no one and hurts everyone, or whether you're going to let yourself have this. He stood in the hallway. He stood there long enough that she thought she had her answer, and it was the bag. She started to turn. His hand closed around hers. She stopped. Turned back. He was 2 feet away. His expression was the most open she had ever seen it. All the composure stripped back, showing the original shape of things, how much space there actually was when it wasn't full of carefully arranged objects designed to fill it. "I don't know how to do this," he said. Not an excuse, a fact, stated with the same directness he gave everything, a precision that was not coldness but honesty so complete it had never learned to soften. "Neither do I," she said. "We'll figure it out." He held her hand. He didn't let go. From the garden. "Chaewon, you have to push higher. That's not high enough. That's barely moving." Jiseon looked toward the window, then at Nadia. Something that had been held very still for a very long time began, carefully, to move. 5 weeks later, the door to his office burst open at 3:17 on a Thursday afternoon. This was, objectively, the worst possible moment for it. 3 syndicate representatives sat across his desk. Men who had come from 2 cities, who ran operations in 7 districts, who had not traveled here to be interrupted. The atmosphere had been one of controlled authority and serious consequence. The kind of meeting where the temperature in the room was a negotiating variable. Then Seraphine ran in. Paint on both hands, complete afternoon's worth of creative energy still needing outlet, and she covered the full length of the office, past the 3 representatives who watched her approach with expressions cycling through surprise and confusion and something approaching alarm, and arrived at Jiseon's chair and put both paint-covered hands on his knee and looked up at him and said, "I made a picture of you. It's in the kitchen because it was still wet. Can you come see it?" Chaewon said it looked just like you, but Chaewon never smiles, so I don't know if he can tell. The 3 representatives did not move. Big Jiseon, feared across 7 districts and 2 cities, the man who had not smiled in 4 years, looked down at the 5-year-old with paint on his suit and smiled. Not the quiet, startled version that had been finding its way out of him in kitchens and hallways for 5 weeks. A full one, unhurried, unguarded, the kind that changed the entire shape of a person's face. The representatives looked at each other with the expressions of men recalibrating something fundamental about their understanding of a person they thought they knew. "I'll come see it," he said. He looked at the men across his desk with the same authority he always had, not diminished by 1 fraction. "We'll resume tomorrow morning. Chaewon will see you out." He picked Seraphine up, paint hands and all. She wrapped her arms around his neck and began describing the painting in detail. It had him and Mama, and Rabbit, and the garden, and a lot of yellow because yellow was the best. And he listened to every word of it, all the way down the hall. Nadia was in the kitchen doorway. She had the expression she made when she was trying not to look as happy as she was. The painting was on the counter. 3 figures in green and orange under a sun that took up most of the upper third of the paper. Not precise, not realistic, but unmistakably, completely, a family. He stood in front of it with Seraphine in his arms and looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at Nadia across the kitchen. He reached out his free hand. She crossed the room and took it. They stood in front of the painting of their family while the afternoon light came long and gold through the window, and Seraphine explained every element of the composition, which took a while, because there was a great deal to explain and she wanted it understood properly. Seraphine pointed at the tallest figure. "That's you," she told Jiseon. "See? I made you smiling." He looked at the large, generous yellow smile on the figure that was supposed to be him. "Because that's how I see you," she said, with the serene confidence of someone reporting a verified fact. "You're always smiling now." He held her a little tighter. He had been. He hadn't noticed until she named it. Baek Jiseon, who had not smiled in 4 years, smiled. 3 more times before dinner. Nadia counted. She would keep counting, she knew, for a very long time, and she already knew she would never get tired of it. The candy had worked. It just took a little longer than a 5-year-old expected. Some love stories begin with grand gestures, with declarations in skywriting or carved in stone, built by people who have never been seriously broken and approach love as a given. This one began with a crushed orange candy in a child's outstretched hand. A little girl who walked up to the most dangerous man in Seoul and saw only someone who needed help, who decided, with the absolute logic of someone too young to know you weren't supposed to do this, that the answer was simple. Give him the candy. Ask him to smile. It was the most straightforward transaction in the world. And it started something that included a kitchen at 2 a.m, a bowl of rice congee, a hallway where a man finally took someone's hand and didn't let go, and a painting, in yellow and green with a sun that took up the whole sky. Nadia had come to Seoul for a research fellowship. She had found something her methodology had no framework for. She kept it anyway. Jaseon had spent 4 years building a fortress and calling it strength. A 5-year-old walked through it with a piece of candy. He was still learning what to do with the gratitude. But he was learning. And he was smiling the whole time. That was enough. That was everything. If this story moved you, if you felt that hallway, that kitchen, that painting, subscribe right now and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Tell me which moment hit you the hardest. I read every single one, and I write these stories for you. Thank you for being here. I will see you in the next one.